Plenty of seats up front. All right, welcome. It is great to see such a big crowd. So welcome to those here in West Bethany and to those watching on WLH. Edgar, were you expecting this kind of crowd today?
Well, yes.
Of course. So we're very happy to have Edgar Stace and his daughter Susan with us. She's a retired teacher, and they had the privilege of touring Paraguay and Peru together just last month in March. They call it a wonder tour because it began with the Iguazu Falls, which is on the registry as one of the world's natural wonders. The tour ended with the popular Inca's indigenous wonder in Peru. And in between these wonders was the Mennonite wonder in the Paraguayan Chaco. Along with seeing pictures today and hearing mind-shattering stories of Mennonites immigrating there from Canada first and then Ukraine following the Russian Revolution. Needless to say, Edgar has a lot of experiences to draw from. He had 25 or more visits to Paraguay in the past 50 years, and he represented Mennonite Central Committee, the American Leprosy Mission, and served as a tour interpreter for approximately 10 tours. So let's give them a hand. Welcome to Edgar and Susan.
Thank you. I'm impressed and pleased that so many of you have interest in this wonder tour, and you don't even have to pay money to take the tour. We'll try to take you through it in a way that lets you feel like you maybe were there. I am Edgar Stace. I reside here in Landis Homes in Harvest View 024. I say quite happily so, and I'm quite pleased to see a number of you here, and special welcome to you all. So, she's already indicated, I'm not a Paraguayan, but I have been there a number of times. And Paraguay is very close to my heart. And then we have the bookends on either side, which have their own publicity, so that will take care of itself. And this silver-haired lady is my daughter. She was with me on this tour, and we're still friends.
To me about doing this, and while I was still teaching, he would say, "Oh, surely they'll let you off if they know that you want to go with your dad." I'd be like, "Surely they won't." But then I retired, and we hatched the plan together, and it was a wonderful time. Wonderful.
We have a stream of pictures. Most of them are hers. But we must at least let it be known that we're not really photographers, and we aren't really equipped like photographers are. We don't have thousands of dollars worth of cameras hanging from our necks. These pictures are taken with a cell phone, and so please make some allowance for that. Well, with that preliminary out of the way, we can say this wonder tour, I want to say that for me it was a challenge to put this hour together. The problem was not in filling the hour, but it was in reducing a very big subject. Any one of these three wonders are a subject for an evening. And so we're going to try to cover all three and probably not do justice to any of them because the time is short, but I have tried to condense it to the essentials. We had a fantastic journey into the heartland of South America. You know, maybe you haven't looked at your map recently, but if you want to know where Paraguay is, just put a big map, a big X over the South American continent, and where the lines meet, that's where you find Paraguay and Bolivia, the two landlocked countries in South America. And that is where the focus for the second wonder will be. Our tour was expertly organized by Wilmer Martin, who was the former owner of the Tour Imagination. We assembled in Miami, but soon we were airbound with a brief stopover in Panama. No, we did not see the locks. We crossed over the equator unnoticed. You know, only later do you realize, yeah, that was we crossed the equator. You crossed it unnoticed. And then we were in the land of the Southern Cross, a constellation of stars that forms the cross and can only be seen in the southern hemisphere. We never see it here. But we were so busy with everything else, I don't think we ever even saw the cross when we were there. But anyway, we had the Atlantic Ocean on our left side and the Pacific Ocean on our right side, and soon we were sweltering in Asunción's summer heat. We were warned that February is their hottest month, and we did see over 100 temperatures, but there's a lot of air conditioning around there.
It was 108. I have proof.
Oh, yes.
108. Very hot.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah. So we arrived there in Asunción on Saturday or really early Sunday morning. Monday morning came too soon. No, it was Sunday, but church was not until 4 p.m. Now, a lot of the things I'm telling you have a backstory, and that there is a backstory there. Why would a church meet at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? So we had time for orientation, briefing, a city tour, and a little stopping. There was also time to visit an old friend residing in the new, and I want you to hear this, the new 7-story retirement home Mennonites have just built in Asunción. I am not aware of any other 7-story hotel or retirement village. 7 stories. I was in it and saw it, and my friends are living in it. So, the Mennonite church reception was warm, but don't expect us to remember anything about the German sermon. Our minds were made up, our minds were set for the big week coming up. Monday morning came too soon, but we pulled ourselves together, and before long, we were packed like sardines in our 12-passenger MW bus, headed for the Iguazu Falls. The countryside in Paraguay, no mountains in Paraguay, and no water, that is no lakes or ocean. And so we were, before long, we had reached, our first serious stop was the twin Mennonite colonies. We're not in the Chaco yet. We're now still in East Paraguay. The colonies of Sommerfeld and Berchtal. They are sometimes referred to as the old Mennonite, old colony Mennonites in Paraguay. Now, for shorthand language, if there were really solid, well-knowledgeable Canadians here, they would not totally approve of my simplification. But if I have only a short time to explain, I say the old colony are to the Russian Mennonites what the Amish are to the Swiss Mennonites. They are the conservative wing, and so we stopped in on them. They often feel neglected. We don't come there very often. So they were very happy to have us stop by. They are serious-minded people that are seeking to find their place in the world, hardworking, peace-loving people. They emigrated there from Canada in 1948, and again, that is a story in itself. Our hosts were Albert and Mary Hildebrandt, who later joined the tour. Delightful couple. In one generation, the Hildebrandt family has built an impressive flour mill. The best way to picture the size of their business, they have a fleet of 250 trucks to haul their flour to the farthest corners of Paraguay. They serve the whole country of Paraguay. Not probably what you would expect from these Mennonite immigrants. Their second business is noodles, and the day we were there, they were just starting a cookie line. I was happy when I heard him say, we're beaming our business not to the upper levels of society, but to the people who can afford what we supply them with. Always it seems we have to hurry on to the feature of the day, and this day the feature was the Iguazu Falls. We're driving now in the direction of Brazil. We parked our van and joined the stream of fellow day international visitors going to see the falls. But we hadn't seen them yet, but we had heard them. And the stream, we could hear the sound of rushing water. Always, we parked, okay, I'm a bad reader. Then suddenly, there they were in full view. 7 wonders of the natural world. Now, there are different categories of wonders of the world. They are one of the 7 wonders of the natural world. We feel the spray, but 3 cascades. A cascade is a fancy word for a falls. There are 3 cascades in Niagara, but a system of 275 cascades for the Iguazu Falls over a space of 1.7 miles. And we're walking all of this. Yeah, we were stiff the next day.
Can I just say, Dad said he felt like he was sore enough he was walking like an 80-year-old.
We have not rehearsed this. But when you stand there and just see it, it is a marvelous panorama of nature. Observing it, deserving of its international reputation. Words are insufficient to really explain it, and that's why you're seeing it. So enjoy it. That's it. What you see is what there is, and of course, the amount of water that flows there is dependent on the amount of rainfall. I think I've seen the falls when there was more water flowing than now. Maybe they didn't have 275 cascades, but anyway, it's there. We did not see it, but a valuable part of this whole installation is the multi-billion-dollar electric generators that are supplying power to parts of Brazil and Paraguay. This includes the Mennonite colonies 600 kilometers away. So that the Mennonite energy comes from the Iguazu Falls generation. Because Paraguay gets a bigger share of the falls than it can use in electricity, it sells its surplus to Brazil. And by that reason, the export of electric is its 2nd largest export. So the falls are important to everyone. Okay, so we trace our steps back to Asuncion with a stopover in the globally known Mennonite leprosy treatment program in Kilometer 81. A well-done PowerPoint gave us a glimpse of the excellent work being done here. Starting 75 years ago with the help from MCC, now it is operated by the Mennonite churches in Paraguay. Then, when we were there, they were celebrating. They had just made a $1 million addition so that they could beef up their making of prostheses for people who have had damaged feet by leprosy or any other matter for that. But I sometimes say, if God has a map where there's a pin wherever God's work is being done, Kilometers 81, there would be a pin. It's just one of those special places where there seems to be a special blessing. And it's been there for 75 years. And it too is a story in its own right. So we enjoy that. After an overnight in Asuncion, we are ready to take on the ill-reputed Chaco. It occupies more than half of Paraguay and spreads out into Bolivia and Argentina. The reputation was that if white people wander into the Chaco, they do not come out alive. Its extreme temperature earns it the nickname the Green Hell. It didn't get very good press for a long time, especially when Stroessner was president. Then there was a double reason not to. But they've managed. From there, they, with their... Yeah, I have to catch myself here. We had a 6 hours of windshield time to imagine, now we're on our way to the Chaco. And we are in our bus and we are traveling. I call it windshield time because there's nothing else. You look in either direction, all you see is bush with the occasional tree, but bush forever. Then we think of the contingent of Mennonites arriving there in 1926. They were transported up the Paraguay River to our right. The river is flowing that way by a refitted, outdated freighter to a point known as Puerto Quesada. From there, they with their children and anything they brought with them had to go in another 200 kilometers into the interior. And that was tough going. Even the road we were traveling on is a story in its own right. A 400-kilometer road, and imagine this, from here to Pittsburgh, from here, a road a kilometer high, the banks, and 6 kilometers wide, and I mean meters. The road is 1 meter high, 6 meters wide, and 400 meters long.
No, 400 kilometers.
400 kilometers. I'm still getting it wrong.
You got it.
But there we are. That's the road we're traveling on. And it gets boring. There's not much to see on where you're going. That's what I've explained is how it is. But finally, we get to the point where there seems to be a change in ecology here. And sure enough, there are fences and there are Holstein cows in there. That's a pretty good hint. We're coming toward Menno Colony. So we leave the bush behind, and now we are entering Menno Colony. Just back on the road yet. That road went through some marshy land, and even professional road builders didn't want any part of it. So MCC, but the colonies were at that point in a very precarious condition. They were very discouraged, and MCC, sensing that, thought maybe the road would make a difference if they were not so isolated. So MCC found, well, actually, again, it's a long backstory, but a Montana rancher offered himself and his equipment to go to Paraguay to build roads. He built roads for 2 years, then he went home, and then MCC found a guy by the name of Harry Harder from Mountain Lake, Minnesota, didn't have an 8th grade teaching or education certificate, but he knew how to run equipment. And they started what they thought would be a 2-year run to complete that road. It took 5 years, but they got it done. And today, it is a stream of traffic night and day that you wouldn't believe, all the traffic that is there. It was the thing that gave them new encouragement. So,
Maybe we asked ourselves.
pardon?
We asked ourselves.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That's the way she was helping me on the tour, too. And obviously, I need it. We ask ourselves, why did the pioneers end up in such a remote location? What were they thinking? And you've only heard the half of it. After 2 or 3 generations in Canada, their lives were just beginning to get easier. Then the Canadian government reneged on a promise allowing Mennonites to conduct their own schools in the German language. That was not a compromise they were willing to make. They said, if we lose our youth, we have no future. We might as well have stayed in Russia. Then a rumor surfaced. Now remember, this is in the pre-internet days, and there's very little reliable information. But a rumor reached them in Canada that there were big expanses of land to be had in Argentina. So they sent 6 scouts down there to look over. And again, it's a story of its own right, but they were diverted from Argentina to Paraguay by a man, Casado, who had a big expanse of land there. And he was anxious to sell some of that land, and did. And they bought land there, and before very long, they were selling their land in Manitoba, and they were getting ready to go south. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, parting with brothers and sisters in the church was hard for them, but they were assuming that some of them would follow later. It was expected that much of the Mennonite population of Manitoba would move, and that they were only the pioneers. Well, it turns out their beginning was so hard that nobody from the back country who heard about that was willing to risk it. So they didn't come. Parting with brothers and sisters in the church was hard. But on New Year's Day, it's New Year's Eve. They are coming up the Paraguay River, 1926. We find 50 families, about 250 people, on this outdated freighter, the Apipi, chugging up the Paraguay River, anxious to see the land they had purchased. Cruelly, are you getting that word, cruel? Cruelly, they were greeted by bad news. There would be a short delay to complete a survey delineating the tract they had purchased from a much larger tract of which it was a part. So imagine a big tract of land here, and this little corner is the part that they had purchased, and that had to be delineated with a survey. So so they were told it would be a short delay, only a short delay. So the first Spanish words that they learned were the words paciencia and mañana. Mañana, mañana. Actually, it took them almost a year living under temporary quarters. And finally, the women had had enough. They did what women in that era wouldn't do. In this era, I'm sure I could imagine women doing this. But in that era, those women did something that was off the record. They told their husbands, you go and find the Ältester, that is the bishop, and tell him, so geht's nicht weiter. That this cannot continue. This has to change. Well, the men came back to their wives, and the wives weren't satisfied. So they said, we're going to go and see the Ältester. And that poor beleaguered man standing there with his heels in the Paraguay River. By the way, he's 37 years old, Mr. Friesen. And so now the women are pounding him. He was having a bad morning. He heard them. I knew. By the way, many of these people I have known. And I met this old man, Mr. Friesen, once. A godly man he was. And he found the right words. His answer was, haltet durch. Stay the course. You remember our long prayer meetings in Manitoba? We concluded them by, it was God's will that we should come, and we're doing that. God will see us through. And this is a hallowed moment. If that bishop would not have found the right words, the miracle in the Chaco would never have happened. And he was the perfect man a very quiet and peaceful man. And they did. The women heard him, and they said, all right. Well, he also told them, we have not reached the maximum of what we can endure. This is the start of this wonder story that we're talking about today. Well, now I need to find my place. I take the time to relate this story because it is so foundational. Had the bishop said anything else, the miracle in the Chaco would never have happened. So our tour members are getting a little sleepy and anxious because we aren't arriving. We began to see some cattle, and yes, we were entering the colony that was now the outcome of what they were doing. We were warmly welcomed and shown a well-made PowerPoint giving some history and facts about Menno Colony. Notice most of these people met us with PowerPoints. Again, that's probably not the image you have of Paraguay, but these were well-done PowerPoints telling us about Menno Colony. We were warmly received and shown a well-made PowerPoint and giving some history and facts about Menno Colony. We visited their modern milk bottling plant. That's an interesting story. At first they could hardly produce enough to meet their own needs. Now they're beginning to produce enough that they have a surplus. And so they have found ways to process that milk so that it could be marketed. So that ends our time that's all the time we're going to take here. But remember, Menno Colony is the oldest and the biggest of these colonies. After 30 minutes on the Mennonite-made roads, I need to emphasize that the government of Paraguay never built a mile of roads for the Mennonites. They have literally built thousands of miles of roads and maintained them. So we're now driving on a Mennonite road from Menno Colony to Fahrenheim Colony. Not having been there for many years, I was impressed with what I was seeing of Fahrenheim Colony, whose capital is Philadelphia. Now, what on earth does that name have to do? Why should any town or city in Paraguay be called Fahrenheim? Well, again, there's a story to that. And if you paid me a little more, I could tell you that story. But for the contract I'm on, doesn't. And the contract has to do with time, not with money. So we've left Menno Colony. We're now in Fahrenheim Colony. Not having been there, I was impressed. At the center is its pride and joy, the modern supermarket. That's the show-off piece of each of these colonies has its own supermarket, and they want to show off how progressive they are. At the center of it is the pride and joy of the supermarket. There are modern schools with elevated lights to facilitate hotly contested evening sports. Here was the new church seating maybe 750 people. Beside it stands the old church, and it made me think, kind of a fantasy. I wish I could go in there and just sit in that empty church, that old historic church, and imagine what those preachers had to give to those badly depressed people, hungry and, their prayers are not being answered. They're praying, but their prayers are not being answered. What did those preachers have to preach about? It was a hard time. Okay, So we're enjoying Philadelphia. It has become the capital of the Chaco. Menno is the oldest and the biggest, but Fahrenheim is the most progressive. They're the ones who are always trying new things. And yet, in some ways, the Mennos have gotten there first. Well, now we're going to leave Fahrenheim and go to Neuland, which is another 30 minutes up the road. These were the ones who survived the Soviet purge. I mean, it was a purge. Their churches and schools had been closed. Their ministers and leaders had been swept away, and the Mennonites were trapped. They couldn't. Their colony life had all been dissolved, and they were not permitted to leave. They were between the rock and the hard place, and that went on for years. And that's how these people that we're now talking about lived. Well, Neuland. These were the Neuland people. We were attracted to the very well-kept garden with figurines to commemorate the past. One of particular interest was a huge stone imported. That is, why would you import a huge stone? Do you have the picture up? Yeah. That's the huge stone where they imported that because they wanted something to illustrate it was the centerpiece of their 25th anniversary celebration. Its purpose was to symbolize something unfailing and indestructible. Okay, this was Neulander's statement to God. Some years later, someone detected what appeared to be a crack in the rock. Imagine. Surely not, but it is there for all to see, unmistakably and growing. And what are we to make of that? It was to be symbolized, God can be counted on. Like this rock, it will not change. And here, the rock is dissolving in our very midst. I'm going to leave that for the preachers to deal with. But, yeah. Now, does this set the stage for the people that are involved in this Chaco story? No. There's a huge piece missing. That is the Indians, more properly called the indigenous, on whose hunting grounds all of this is taking place. Here, too, there is a long backstory we do not have time to tell. Suffice it to say, Mennonites had unknowingly set themselves down in the confluence of numerous indigenous tribes, the most prominent of which were the Inlet. Now, Inlet was one of 8 or 9 other Indian tribes that were in that area, but the Inlet were, for whatever reason, they were most drawn to us, and in fact, they came and welcomed the Mennonite bodies that were coming and, you might say, invading their land. They brought a peace offering to them at their arrival. These
cultures.
Yeah. These cultures, the white and the brown, both about equally poor. Yeah, the Mennonites were about as poor as the indigenous, have coexisted in the central Chaco for almost 100 years now. Remarkable. This is a very remarkable story and not well told. It had not been easy, and mistakes, that relationship between the whites and the browns, they refer to themselves that way, Mennonites and the indigenous. Those groupings, they were, that relationship had not been easy, and mistakes have been made. Now, that could occupy a whole evening, the mistakes that were made. Mistakes were made, and it's not all over now. It's still ongoing. It is a moving target of how these two cultures are going to interact as they go ahead. but it is a model in intercultural living with few equals anywhere. Hear that. That interface between the indigenous and the modern coming in cultures has gone very poorly, as we know, in this country and in Canada and wherever it is. It's a sad part of history. But this little experiment in Paraguay is, though not perfect, it is as good as any that we know about. It's an interesting interaction there. Well, back to Philadelphia, we attended the Sunday morning worship service.
Dad, you have a really good part here, where we got a concert by the Indigenous choir.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So
Yeah. But it is, we are touched, we were touched, thank you, when an inlet music group came to sing and play for us and serve a hot meal cooked cooked under the trees.
So I don't know if this will come through. Then we joined in and sang with them, and it was really sweet.
It was a highlight of the trip. But just to say this yet, there are many statistics that we could give, but you'll remember this one. These are the people who were totally illiterate when the Mennonites came. Now 70% of the adults who are within the confines of the program that has been working there between the two cultures, 70% are literate. And there are a lot of other statistics that could be used to show the progress that has been made. But I want us to, again, say the whole picture. The Mennonite world is increasing, and the Indian world is getting better, but they're growing further apart. The Mennonite world is getting better faster than the indigenous world. And that's the same everywhere where the indigenous are. Their world is disappearing. So thank you, Sue, for calling me back. Now tell me where we are.
Back in Philadelphia. Back in Philadelphia.
Where? I don't see it. Yeah, back. Okay, thank you. Back in Philadelphia. See why she needed to be there. But back in Philadelphia, we attended the Sunday morning worship service, followed by 6 more hours of windshield time to retrace our steps to Asuncion, while reflecting on, we now have 6 hours to just drive down that straight Trans-Chaco Highway back to Asuncion and to reflect on what we have heard and seen. German Mennonites.
There does not appear to be.
Yeah. German-speaking Mennonites are relaxing their previous national loyalties. What are those? Canada and Germany. Those were their fallbacks. And there's still a very, very active flow between Paraguay and Canada. And the German thing has cooled off, but it's still there. And those are kind of going away. And the uprising, the upcoming relationship is deepening their roots in Paraguay. I had a beautiful experience one evening when, there was a home there, a house there. MCC never owned many properties in the world, but we owned one property in Asuncion. And one evening I always stayed there. I never stayed in a hotel. I always stayed in the MCC home. And one evening a young woman was doing the evening duty. And I chatted with her. I asked her which colony she was from, and she told me. And I asked her a few other things. I said, do you like it here in the city? And she said, no. I said, would you rather be in the Chaco? Yeah, she said. Well, I said, if you could plan your life to be at either place. Oh, she says, no question. I'd want to be in the Chaco. I said, well, what's there in the Chaco that you enjoy so much? Oh, then her whole tone changed. Oh, she says, in the Chaco, those evenings are so nice. The birds are singing and the flowers are blooming, and that's where my friends are. Oh, if I could just spend the rest of my life in the Chaco, my life would be fulfilled. That's the next generation now. They are becoming Chacanians. They are becoming Paraguayans, and they are learning Spanish. And I don't know if they salute the Paraguay flag or not. Now, economically speaking, Mennonites appear now to be on solid footing. Now, who am I to say that? Don't tell some experts on it, but that's my reading. Mennonites are on a good footing economically. There are other areas where the ice is thinner, but economically, my observation is that Mennonites appear now to be on solid footing. The public views Mennonites as wealthy and hardworking. You ask Paraguayans, I did that just within the last few days. I asked, what do the Paraguayans think of the Mennonites? The first word was, well, they're hardworking. They're hardworking and they're rich. That's the public image of the Mennonites. The public view. Some Mennonite names appear on Paraguay's list of richest. Now, don't push me on that too hard, but that is true. It's not my assessment that they are rich. That is the assessment of people who observe them there. And I will say that they are now building houses that would look nice on any Mennonite street, only they have features that I've not seen here in North America. That is, there are places, the nicest houses have imported coconut trees standing in front of their houses. They have that, but we don't. So, okay. Now this sentence has this carries a lot of freight. Their greatest vulnerability may be the growing ethnic and economic diversity. Can these, when Mennonites and indigenous were both equally poor, that was one thing. But now the Mennonites are becoming rich, and the indigenous, though getting better, are nowhere near where that, and they're not within reach of that. And that, I would say, in my assessment, is the greatest vulnerability of Mennonites in Paraguay. And overlooked and almost unpopulated land has been converted into a productive garden. The title of my first book was Garden in the Wilderness. By a people whose strongest mandate was to do God's will. When the times were so hard, and what could they fall back on? That was the one thing they fell back on. We are in God's will, and God will see us through. And one Fahrenheimer told me, we knew we would be poor. We didn't know that we would be poor so long. When Fahrenheim Colony, that was the more advanced of the colonies, was celebrating its silver anniversary, it was under the cloud of not sure if the colony would survive. That's how the first 25 years went. They were squeezed to the very minimum. If it got any worse, they would have to give it up. So, this overlooked and almost unpopulated land has been converted into a productive garden by people whose strongest mandate was to do God's will. That was their bottom line. The obstacles were superhuman, but they were driven by an unquenchable faith. Time is not adequate to analyze what brought this is about, might we think of it as an invisible hand that made possible what was thought to be impossible. We are left wondering. Yeah, the wonder word takes a different meaning here. Questions to ponder as we prepared our way for Mennonites to see. Yeah, see the Menno people, they were the first ones there. They are now 3 years from celebrating 100 years. And they're going to have a big celebration. And they're going to tell how hard, as I did. Well, we have a little ways to go yet, and then I will be open for questions. I do not say I will answer your questions. I will respond to your questions. Another short night.
Yeah, good.
I don't see anybody sleeping. Another night, and we are back at the airport. We still have one wonder to go. We're now going to wonder number 3, the capital of the Incas, Cusco. Peru, a stopover on our way to the Machu Picchu. Cusco is 11,000 feet altitude, and the air is thin. Some people use oxygen. We were warned to slow it down because of the thin air. Cusco was once the capital of the vast Inca Empire. Are you aware that empire stretched from north to south, 1,400 miles, coast on the Pacific coast? Most North Americans have a very incomplete history of this period following the Christopher Columbus so-called discovery of the Americas. I have a book here. It's a book I recommend. It has a nice title, 1491. We all know 1492 is a date. Most of us who don't remember dates still remember 1492. But my education, I don't know about yours, but my education of the 15th and 16th century is almost nil. But here, that is the concentration of this book to tell, and that is where you have the Incas and the Indians and the Aztecs in Mexico and so forth. Well, 1,400 mile long. Most North Americans have a very incomplete history, a sense of that history. This is not the time and place to make all of that right, but to suffice it to say that in the time of Columbus, the Inca population may have exceeded 10 million people. You know, there's a book with the title, I think it's a Mennonite book, This Land is Not Empty. I think we have the impression that there were no people around. No, the research of this book is that there may have been more than 10 million people in that Inca world. We were warned to slow it down. Cusco was once the capital of the vast Inca Empire. Most North Americans have a very complete. This is not the time and place to make all of this right, but suffice it to say that in the time of Columbus, the Inca population may have been 10 million or more. The Incas are known for building thousands of miles of terraces. Their geneticists developed the potato. You thought the potato is always, no, that doesn't go back to Garden of Eden. It was the Incas that did that. The Incas were known for building thousands of miles. They even made altitudinal differences because their terraces went up the mountains, and the potatoes at the top needed a different genetic than those at the bottom, and they even had that figured out. They were advanced cultures. Their astrologers produced a calendar that was more accurate than those produced by their European associates. Their stone cutters erected stone walls that didn't even need mortar in the joints, and moved huge boulders. How did they move them? They had no cranes to do so. Well, This all came sadly crashing down when, from 1531 to 1533, Pizarro, with 168 soldiers, armed with the latest in weaponry and 60 horses, defeated the Inca army, crushed it under its heel. War and later pox crushed the empire, leaving the Inca cities to grow over with weeds. Inca cities became hidden wilderness, hidden under weeds and vines. It was discovered by the American adventurer Hiram Bingham in 1911 and finally made into the tourist attraction it is today. The end of a culture. We spent the evening touring Cusco. We were shocked to see how the Spaniard conquistadores had destroyed the Inca temples and shamelessly built their churches on the Inca foundations. That's just beyond imagination.
Well, and then our tour guide said that they forced slavery.
Yeah.
They forced the Inca
Thank you.
population to build those cathedrals.
Thank you. All right. Where am I? It was discovered, oh yeah. We spent the evening touring Cusco. We were shocked. They filled their cathedrals with religious figurines lathered with gold, all in the name of Christianity. It has to be seen to be believed. Another early morning train ride, and we arrive in our destination, Machu Picchu. But we do not see the terraces lined open in air craters until a bus ride with 8 hairpin turns, delivering to see the surreal Machu Picchu landscape. Terraces as far as the eye can see. Terraces everywhere, some with more than 50 ledges. We saw the occasional alpaca, but most, by the way, this is an alpaca sweater, in case you forgot. But most of the walkways were filled with tourists like ourselves. Some paths were intentional for professional climbers, but we were content with less dangerous paths. I found myself wondering what it must have been like when it was under the Inca construction. Children playing hide and seek among the terraces and rocks. Women doing their wash or making meals, preparing for the beautiful, or a woman weaving a multicolored sweater for sale in the market. Men chipping away at stones. After a night of restful sleep with the sound of rushing water in the background, we were taken on a, literally, out-of-this-world nature hike. The focus was on orchids and hummingbirds. One scene was so striking, so beautiful and peaceful. Sue nudged me and said, "Heaven?"
It was really amazing. Okay, now you take a drink, and I'll show some pictures of the orchids.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
No, we're still looking at the orchids.
you want to do what?
We're looking at the orchids, and we're
Oh, fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm giving you a break here.
Yeah. Don't tell anybody. I did buy sticks there.
They were wonderful. I really appreciated them. I bought them too.
I said, but you won't see them around Landis Homes.
He hid them in the closet. All right. Okay, you're up.
I'm up. Well, that's essentially the end of our story. Iguazu, Mennonite Philadelphia, Machu Picchu. I turn to our wondrous story has ended, but with David we say, what are human beings that God is mindful of us, mortals that God should take care of us, out of the Psalms. So, that gives you a total of 6 minutes to ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you have questions, please raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you so everyone can hear.
Are the Mennonites losing any of the Plattdeutsch, their Plattdeutsch? Are they being,
Are Mennonites losing Plattdeutsch?
are they speaking more
Can I
Spanish?
just say I had some long nights with him talking Low German and them laughing away, and I did not know what they were talking
Plattdeutsch is in pretty good shape. It is the Umgangssprache, the language when one Mennonite couple visits another Mennonite couple in Philadelphia, they speak Plattdeutsch. But the business language is Spanish. The church language is High German. But the Umgangs language is still Plattdeutsch, and I think it will probably continue to be. And I'm okay with that. Are you okay with that, Agnes? Yo. Yeah.
Okay. Who else?
Here's another question.
What would be the Mennonite population in Paraguay?
There is no recent census that can answer that, but I heard a man answer that, a Paraguayan answer that question, a very, very well-informed man, a man I trust. He said he just rounded off at 100,000. And that would consist of 3 categories. The German Mennonites, and just be informed, we have only talked here about, well, we have talked about the 3 colonies and the indigenous in the Chaco, and you remember we had Mr. Hildebrandt's flour mill in the Summerfell. We have only talked about 5 colonies. There are at least 10. There are at least 5 of those other colonies that are in East Paraguay who really don't want anything to do with us. Remember, I told you these are the Amish of the Russian Mennonites, and so when I say 100,000 Mennonites, the biggest category would be those of German background in the Chaco and in East Paraguay. That'd be one category. The second would be the indigenous. And that number I hesitate to give because what is in the program and what is out of the program, but I don't know. I have heard, the last figure I heard was 17,000. It may be more than that, I don't know. Are very evangelical people, wherever they are. And they have brought that emphasis into, and they have done evangelizing. They are doing evangelizing. In fact, I spoke to one of their Latino ministers, and he said, Paraguay has 17 departments, and our goal is that we will have a Mennonite church in each of these 17 departments. They're not there now, but they're growing. And I thought I saw a Paraguayan woman here earlier. She left before the service was over. She's a product. She's here working at LMHS and MCC. And she left while the service was underway. I'm sorry she left, but she would be one example of that, of one of this. So those 3 categories would make up. You add them, and in the opinion of this well-informed person, it adds up to about 100,000. So from that, yeah.
You mentioned about the young woman at the MCC house and her love for the Chaco. Are the Mennonites, or these folks, able to keep their young people, or are the young people leaving the church or the colonies?
Well, probably better than we. They're paying, they're moving closer into the world. They're marrying. Most Mennonites marry Mennonites, but there are mixed marriages. There are divorces, and that kind of pathology is increasing. But I have no way of knowing if it's better or worse. but I would assume it might in fact be as good or better than, let's say, their Canadian equivalent. That's just my off the cuff comment.
Who else? Did you have a question, Jim? Oh, you didn't. Okay. All right then.
You know, you've been such a good audience. I'll give you a bonus, a bonus story. When the Neulanders came, now we're right at 4 o'clock now. You're going to give me, you'll enjoy this story. When the Neulanders came to Paraguay, 40% of the households had no men. Why? Because the men had been drafted into the army in Russia, and many of the men had been carted away, and that's the way it was. It was a colony of women. And so one group of these women, when they were distributing what land would be given to which group of people who would be together, one group of people said, "We are women, and that's all we want. We don't want any men around." And the man said, "Tell us that again." Yep, they said, "That's right. We want a colony without men. In Germany, we had to do as the men told us. But here we want to be free under the stars, and we don't want any men around." And the man finally said, "Oh, they'll be back. They'll see how hard it is to deal with these oxen, and how hard it is to put up a straw roof on a house and all of that." Well, long story short, they got their wish. They built their houses, each woman on her own house, and in the evening they would shower. It didn't need any curtains, and many of them knew how to play some instrument, and they would gather in the evening around a campfire, and they would sing till the evening was gone, and the Paraguay story is such a male story that I need that story to kind of balance the equations a little better. But they did it, and it worked.
A big, big thank you to Edgar and Susan. Let's give them a big hand. All right. You're dismissed.